Hello. Today we are looking at something interesting I've done, which is movement pi. The first dev update on this thing. So movement pi is a Python game that is based on the same idea as a movement patch, but instead of being a patch game, this is a Python game. Now let's just check it out by just running it here. So yeah, here we go. So we're gonna close the console log, and this is the main menu we have here. You have the same start, editor options, extra, and exit options. Now if you go to, let's say, options, we can change character, change second character, we can change our bullet distance. So right now it comes up with this text prompt and you have to change it like that. You can change the game mode to 1 player, 2 player, or a headless, just like in movement patch. You can also enable full screen mode, which is interesting. So you can play in full screen, which can be beneficial in some cases. So we're gonna enable it here. Changing colors background is like temporary. I plan on adding something different here. Extra. This is interesting. We have convert movement patch map, which is the only functional thing right now. There's preview map and nano map generator. So let's change the bullet distance to 5. Why not? So since this is like movement patch, it's actually backwards compatible. I mean, in a sense that you have to convert all of the maps, of course, but it does work. So I have converted a few maps here. Let's try 3. So in full screen mode, this is interesting. So it actually scales up everything. So this looks exactly like movement patch. It must be here. So when I fire a bullet in a non-color map, it still displays color because this is Python, not patch. I can actually use textures for. Okay, that is a weird bug. Okay, so when I go down, it sets my position to that. Yeah, this is a conversion error. But like I can teleport here, I can finish the map. The collisions aren't really working right now. Another fun thing, since we have this much space here, I actually add a mouse support. So you can navigate the menus using your mouse, which is convenient. So this is a color map converted, so I can shoot the cacti. So this is like the tutorial map from 3.0 of movement patch, and it's playing here. So that's a cool thing. So this is what maps look like when you play them. But what makes this version unique is that instead of using actual like patch characters, it uses textures. Specifically texture sheets, and each map can have up to, I think it was something like 99 simultaneous textures. I may be wrong, but somewhere around there. Labyrinth as an example. So we have our character here. We can move him around, and don't mind the box around him. I'll fix that at some point. Adding support for stuff like transparency and textures and stuff like that. Right now that's not possible. The house, right? So this is a more impressive map. It still has actually support for gravity, so I can jump around and push with blocks, of course. Everything in the previous movement patch games is implemented. But we can finish this map here by just jumping around in the house kind of environment, and we can finish it, and it's fun. Okay. Okay, this is a gravity map. You can move around, jump on the tree, just like in Moment Patch. The physics for gravity are a bit different, you may be able to tell. But it's still pretty good. Let's actually check out the headless mode. So on one map I had falling boxes. Now this, for some reason, crashes the game. I wonder why. I'll have to debug this, but I did have it working before, and it did display falling boxes. So headless mode is something I'll have to fix. Right now I can't demonstrate that. But trust me, it was working before, so that's kind of weird. Still have a search feature, so I can do level, for example, and you get all the tutorial levels. Oh yeah, the spiral map, which doesn't scale quite properly in full screen. That's really weird. But otherwise it's totally playable. It's just the top and bottom are a bit cut off. So I'm not sure how that could happen, considering how my scaling algorithm works, but apparently this is possible. I didn't know that. So that's like playing the map kind of deal. The real cool part is the editor. Now if you remember Movement Patch 3.0, it actually had a pretty good editor. Well, I'll say this is a much better editor than even that. So let's load up a map, shall we? So this is the editor right now. So if you press F1, we can see all the possible key combinations. So you have, so yeah, this can be operated both with a mouse and without a mouse. I initially designed it to be operated without a mouse, but then realized I can do some cool stuff with the mouse, so that's what I ended up doing. Another cool thing we can do, so you can zoom in and stuff. You can go really close, and you can also zoom out and make it smaller. You can press F2 to reset the size. Gravity settings, I see. So here I can just change gravity settings. I can disable that. That kind of stuff. If you press F6, what did that do? Oh, I can choose the texture pack. So those ones that have converted in front of them, those are created after converting a map, so that's what those are. But I can actually show you if I choose Toski, which is that, it's gonna look wrong. And that's because we're still using the same scale for one tile as we were for the previous section. And of course you can see that the scaling here is much different. To fix that, you press F8. The patch texture was 8 by 12 here. And that looks much more correct. So press F2 to fix the scaling. Now we can zoom in. And we can see what's going on. So these are the actual textures it was using in the same positions, and it will be reusing those. So I'm gonna switch back to the previous texture, which once again we have to change the size to 30 by 30, I believe, like that, and it looks F2 and it fixes the scaling, and that's that. And what else we have? F9. Okay, so F9 to F12 we can show and hide different things. So F9 to hide the markers. Actually those are wall markers. So if in Moment Patch there was no easy way to like remove a wall, and if you have added a wall there was no easy way to see if you actually did it. So here if I press enter, you can see it's gone. There's no wall. If I press it again, there's a wall now. Say I don't want wall to be here because it's like impossible to get here anyway. I can do that. And then another thing we can show and hide is the text about the map, so we can show the information here, like the map area, which is dynamic in this version, so you can have any size of map you want. Then we can hide and show the block selector, so I can choose any of these. The flashy thing for indicating a selected texture is just temporary, that's gonna be changed. If you're wondering what this is, I'll come back to that later. What did that do? Oh, that did that. So right now we have a flashy selection thing. If you don't want that, you want your regular cursor, you can still use that. You can paint with your cursor like that. That's pretty cool. If you press F, that'll fill in the selected block. I mean, that's freaking insane right there. We were not able to do that before. Like it works for any area and stuff. It will go to every corner. It's using recursion. It's pretty cool, not gonna lie. And you can use it for the back layer here also, so you can make it like that. Change different colors and shape. And we can also do some weird stuff like that. Of course, all of these textures are also temporary. I'm gonna change them eventually. Just some art to get stuff started. Okay, so numpad 1 to 4 has to do with this thing right here. So this is the palette, I call that. So if you select the block, let's say the red one, with 2, say num block is on, we do that, it's added to the palette. Then we do 3 and 4 and add this one to the palette. So what does the palette do exactly? If you notice in the help, there's pretty sure there's RNG flood tool will fill the area with random blocks. So that's what this palette is for. So this can specify which blocks you can use in RNG fill. So if you press H, you can see it's filled in with random blocks. You can do the same thing here. It's gonna fill in with random blocks, and all of them have apparently not very equal probability of appearing. I'm wondering why that is. Okay, scroll lock. So let's enable F12 here, and we can move around here. So normally, if you use cursor keys, like the arrows on your keyboard, you can move the block indicator like that. But if you turn on scroll lock, you press it, you can, instead of moving the cursor selection thing, you can move the map around with your cursor keys like that. Like that. So that's pretty cool. You can also change same thing with the mouse. If you hold down middle click, and you can move it around like that. You right click as a wall marker, and left click just allows you to paint the block. So for painting, I recommend using this mode. It's easier and stuff. So yeah, that's cool. Next up we have delete insert. Yes, delete insert is what I want to talk about. So if I press delete/insert, no, I was pressing another key. I was pressing print screen for some reason. You can shift around the blocks like this. And we can press home and end to go to the beginning and the end of the line. So if I just move around the camera a bit, go home, it moved to the left as you can see, and it moves to the end of the line. If you press page up and down, it goes up like to the top, to the down. So we press page up and home. It goes to the up left corner. So that's very useful if you're using only a keyboard. Flood wall tool. So this one's interesting. So let's say you want to add a wall like this. How will you do that? Well, you could go through each individual block and add a wall, or you can use the wall flood tool, which doesn't work. That's very great. Okay, now it works. It seems to not work when there's it's because I actually activated the Trails mode. So if I press T, yeah, that's Trails mode. So that also I can use WASD to move around the block chooser if I'm using only a keyboard. So yeah, that's why that happened. Let's exit Trails mode and the space to place that. So I press I add a teleport, I use I again. It says teleport add, press any key. We do, and if you press Ctrl E to open the script editor, you can see we added a teleport like that. And the script editor is really primitive right now, and I don't want to really show it, but it allows you to make some basic changes and stuff like that. You can press escape to quit that. Okay, let's say I want to make shootable object. Oh, okay, yeah. First you have to pick a block that your block will turn into. Then you press O, and it says shootable object marked. And if you go to the script editor, it turns it into a dash, which is the third block in the list, I believe. So that's a handy feature once again for adding shootable objects. Place a movable object. Okay, that's interesting. So if you press tab, you can add like a box like that, and as you can see, that appears on the editor actually. So like in movement patch, these actually appear with other stuff, but if you hide the markers, they disappear. That's because they're actually entities, so they can appear and disappear because they're on the top layer, like the player is. So that's what that is. This editor is really cool, I have to say. It has a lot of features and it's actually pretty handy for editing maps and stuff like that. So it's a really advanced editor, I have to say. But you may be wondering, how does the tile set look on like a converted map? Well, I'll show you. So this is what it looks like, if you can see that. So yeah, every single block that's been used in the map needs to be converted into a tile here. Of course, we can reuse the tiles, so it only has to really store here all the unique blocks. But on a map like this, we're like only using half of the tile set. Box puzzle. Okay, this map was fun, so just demonstrate moving stuff around. That also works. And here you can see the character is actually blending in with the background, even though it still has its own background. So you can move the blocks around. I almost made a big mistake. So move that around here, and this block around here. Sometimes, oh, well, I found a place where I forgot to add the walls. But yeah, right now. So we completed this puzzle. If there's like more than one box, instead of glitching on top of another box, like in movement patch, this actually works properly. So you can only push one box at a time, because your little stick figure isn't strong enough to push multiple boxes. It's like I'm trying as hard as I can with inertia, but I am just not powerful enough to push these boxes. So that's what this is. Another cool thing about these maps here is if you open them in a text editor. So this is classic to JSON. This is just basically the normal map in Movement Patch, but remade in a new format. You can see that this is a JSON file. It's like much more standard of a format. Like if you're a programmer, you should be able to understand what this is. So this is the code. It's not really published yet on GitHub. You can't find it on my repos yet. I will eventually like add it to my repos, but right now it doesn't exist there. So this is the code. That's how the main menu works. So the main menu itself actually just a dictionary that contains these entries. This is 0.5. It's like pretty much functional. You can do stuff. It's a beta version though, so there's bugs as you saw. I think I didn't showcase the 2-player mode though. I think I didn't. I'll do that later. There's the editor, which, yeah, that's a lot of code, but it's kind of understandable. It's a bit spaghetti, but it's not that bad. Common, this is all the functions shared between different files. Editor, I showed you that. Player, this actually plays the maps. And stuff like that. So how scripting works actually? Let's see. So this is the player class versus the level class. There it is. So there should be an if check function right there. So a script is once again in the JSON file. The maps. Let's select one that has a script. I know this one has a script, so yeah, this is the script. Once again, this is just lines of code that are sanitized so that you can properly decode it instead of it erroring out. Because if you just put that here, it would crash. So yeah. But each line in the script gets executed every frame here, so that's something you should take into account. Even if you're dealing with a map that doesn't use gravity and is not headless, it still gets executed every frame. The game is actually running at 60 FPS, but it's intentionally slowed down with timers and stuff like that. So there's a bit of spaghetti when it comes to the gravity. It's kind of janky. It's a bit of a hack, not gonna lie. The gravity is a bit of a hack because how gravity works, it actually presses the down key for you in different ways, so you get the illusion of the character falling down. In actuality, it's just moving down. So that's one lie I'm adding in this code. If you understand how to read this code, that's basically what's going on here. So every tick is like 5 frames or something like that. So that's the thing. So 60 divided by 5, you get the perceived frames per second, but actual frames per second is 60. I'm pretty sure. Let's see. Yeah, it's 60. So this is PyCame as its library for making everything work. Oh yeah, and that's also a very clever hack. So each entity or a box also has gravity. But what's happening here? We're creating a dummy player that's like completely invisible, that actually pushes the box down. So that's also a big hack. It's kind of funny. Of course, it checks before if there's like free space below and stuff like that. But yeah, it's really hacky way of doing things, but it works. Next up, yeah, I want to showcase the multiplayer. So let's do 2 players. Or I shall call it 2 characters because that's really what this is. And you can control one at a time using arrow keys. And if you press 2, you'll switch to the other player. So this map is actually unfinishable in 2-player mode because you can't jump over this spruce thing. Well, let's take another map that is finishable with 2 players. Sure, let's do this one. Why the hell not? So this is just the exact same map you saw in Movement Patch 3.0. It's just, you know. So we don't actually have to push the boxes here. That bit of code didn't get transformed. As you can see, I finished with the first player, but the second player is still like here. So what do? Well, of course, I just go to the finish line and the map is finished. So that's how that works. I hope it was interesting for you to see this one. And this is a new channel I'm making. So if you like this content, you can subscribe. You may press the like button if you want. You can also press the dislike. You can comment below, and thank you for watching, I suppose. So goodbye.